That's recording it.
I'm fine.
All right. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the St. Louis Public Library in conjunction with the St. Louis Herb Society. Welcome, Ms. Mary Hammer from the St. Louis Herb Society, who is here to talk to us today about the lore and legend of herbs. I just love that title and I can't wait. Before I turn the microphone over to Ms. Mary Hammer, just a couple of things to remind everybody. Please keep your microphone on mute. This program will be recorded, so if you have to get up and wander away for a bit, fear not, you'll be able to locate it again for about a week after the library gets it posted. And if you have any questions, please feel free to use the chat feature at the bottom of your screen. Miss Mary is super great about answering all of them after the program presentation. So now I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Miss Mary Hammer. Take it away.
Okay. Oh, thanks, Erica. Erica and I are becoming friends over doing these programs. It's been so wonderful. And I'm glad that so many people are wanting to learn more about herbs. So that's, without any further ado, I'm going to share my screen now and get started. So I am in the St. Louis Herb Society and have been in this organization since 2006. We are celebrating our 80th anniversary this year, and our mission is to further the study, use, and knowledge of herbs. And that's one of the ways we do that is through the Speakers Bureau programs such as this one. Our definition of an herb is very broad, and any useful plant, well, except maybe some trees. But of course, for centuries, herbs have been used all over the world for cooking, medicinal purposes, decorating the home, for fragrance, for household use, such as insect repellents and dyes, etc. And you can use them fresh or in solutions or dried or extract or frozen. The leaves and seeds and flowers and roots and stems are still, of course, used in many ways today. Another thing that the Herb Society does is we maintain the herb garden at the Missouri Botanical Garden. Now, last year, we were not allowed to come in and work, and we're hoping to be able to do that this year. We're very hopeful about that because this would be this is the week that we would be planting our plants. So we're hopeful that we can get back in there. We have spring and fall classes every year. And when you're in person, of course, we give a big spread similar to these. We have products sometimes for sale at these events. And next week is our spring class taking place on Tuesday, May 11th. There is a fee for this, and you register through the Missouri Botanical Gardens website at mobot.org. We run and organize and run the annual spring herb sale. Now this year it was a virtual sale. We sold everything online, and then this last weekend, Friday and Saturday, were all the pickups, and it was quite interesting. Again, we are hoping to be able to do our sale in person next year, but we just don't know. We give presentations like this one and talks about herbs. And another thing we do, if we are allowed to this year, Urban Heirloom Tuesdays from June through August. We work in our gardens on Tuesday mornings from 8 till 10 a.m. And then from 10 to noon, in conjunction with the education department, we give away a free herb plant, a different one each week for the first 100 visitors. And we do this in our garden behind the Henry Shaw House. We have publications for sale. Several of you already have this, and these books are usually available through the library system as well. Our herbal cookery, in our 80 years, we've only published 4 cookbooks. So this is the most recent one, and we don't do it very often. It's a wonderful book. Our most recent publication is Herbs A to Z, which is an alphabet book, and I'm going to show you a little bit about each one of those. One of the things I love, besides the recipes about the cookbook, is the index. It's indexed by recipe, but it's also indexed by herb. So if you have oregano, if you grow oregano or you buy oregano, these are all the recipes that use oregano and so forth. And then in the A to Z book, the illustrations were done specifically for us. They're original watercolors by a wonderful young artist, Morgan Hutcherson, who did these beautiful watercolor. Each one is worth framing. And this is one of my favorites. The book is a visit through to an herb garden, along with the pollinators and other creatures that use the herbs. So we give some information, there's illustrations, and then who would visit some parsley? Well, I love this picture. And the black swallowtail butterfly caterpillar, who, if you grow parsley, his green matches the parsley leaf exactly. It's pretty fun. We also have how to grow herbs in the Midwest. And some of what I'm talking about today are lore and legend of the culinary herbs and spices. The library has the first edition. We've since come out with a second edition. Our website has been updated, and you can find a lot more information about our favorite herbs, how to grow them, harvest them, preserve them, and read about all the upcoming events, different talks, and you can order our publications through our website as well. So now we're going to talk about herbs in lore and legend. And the written record. Now, herbs have been used well before this, but the earliest written record we know is in the Sumerians of ancient Mesopotamia, over 5,000 years. And their clay tablets in cuneiform, they describe medicinal uses for plants such as laurel, caraway, and thyme. So these plants were being used 5,000 years ago and more. And the ancient Egyptians are known to have used garlic, coriander, mint, indigo, lavender, and many other herbs as well, some in mummification, some for medicinal, and some just for beauty products and fragrance. Many herbs are mentioned in the Bible, in the Christian Bible, and common people paid their tithes in mint and anise and cumin. And in Proverbs, there's a saying, better is a dinner of herbs where love is than a stalled ox, and that means a fattened ox, when hatred therewith. In Psalms, it says, purge me with hyssop and I shall be clean. Wash me and I shall be whiter than snow. Now, Hyssopus officinalis is almost certainly not the hyssop mentioned in the Bible, because that plant is not found native in Palestine or the area. However, at least 18 other plants have been considered that might be the hyssop of the Bible. Modern botanists generally agree that Syrian oregano, and that's what this is pictured, is the most likely. It was used to cleanse homes defiled by leprosy or death, and came to symbolize cleanliness. So this is a very likely candidate. And this Syrian oregano, by the way, is my favorite oregano. The Holy Roman Emperor Charlemagne had many gardens and was very fond of herbs, and said the herb is the friend of physicians and the praise of cooks. So he brought an Irish botanist to his kingdom, and together they developed gardens that benefited Central Europeans for generations. This is an illustration of Charlemagne's garden. So as for individual herbs and stories, Angelica, the plant's name comes from the Archangel Michael. And the story is here that an angel appeared to a monk in a dream, revealing Angelica's protective powers against the plague. And it was used in this way until the late 1600s. Angelica is also believed, as are many herbs, to be of use against evil spirits and witches' spells. So candied Angelica roots and stems have long been used in strengthening the stomach and treating flatulence. So that's an interesting sidelight of Angelica. It's also a beautiful little plant. Blue false indigo, I grow this. It's historically was used to produce a blue dye by both Native Americans and settlers in this country. However, later on, true indigo, native to Asia, was brought over here, and it makes an even better blue dye. So the false indigo kind of fell out of favor. Still a beautiful perennial plant, and mine is just about, well, another 2 weeks, it'll be looking like this. Basil has many stories, and the genus name of Ocimum comes from the Greek word meaning smell. The species, Basilicum name, could come from Basilius, which means kingly, or from basilisk, which is a legendary serpent or dragon, or even maybe from the Italian word bacio for kiss. One of the basils, holy or Tulsi basil, Ocimum sanctum, is sacred to the Hindu gods of Krishna and Vishnu. So basil is a plant that's been popular worldwide for centuries. Osimus organized the tournaments, which were staged in honor of Pallas. And it said when Osimus was killed by a gladiator, basil grew in that location. And that's why the plant is named after him. It's one of the many herbs that Egyptians may have used in embalming. The ancient Greeks associated basil with misfortune. And when planting the seeds during that period of time, you were supposed to shout and curse and yell really loudly. I'm not exactly sure. I think to drive away evil spirits. Later led to the French phrase semer de basilic, which means to slander. At that time, it was believed to curb the appetite and was originally used more for its scent and aroma than its flavor. It was also an advertisement for a single woman who wanted to advertise her availability. If you placed a pot of basil in your windowsill, that meant that you were available for courting. Now, another plant called rue was thought to be an enemy to poisons, and anything that was unable to grow near it was assumed to be poisonous. And since basil does not grow well near rue, some physicians and doctors figured that basil itself must be poisonous, which is not true. And in the 1500s, some doctors believed that if you just smelled basil, scorpions would grow inside your brain. Now, this was because if basil were placed under a stone in a moist place, a scorpion would show up in a few days' time, and they figured that the basil had turned into a scorpion, whereas he just went for the nice moist place in the dark. And Lord Bacon, in his Natural History, believed that basil, if it had too much sun, would miraculously turn into wild thyme. Again, these are legends. The Greek Orthodox Church, basil has an association with the Holy Cross. And according to this legend, Empress Saint Helena found the location of the true cross by digging for it under a large growth of basil plants. And it's still used today in the Greek Orthodox Church. It's also associated with Urzuli, a voodoo love goddess worshipped in Haiti. So basil has many, many stories. Bay laurel, Laurus nobilis. I don't know if you knew that dried bay leaves can be used to keep weevils away from flour and cereal, those little pantry moths. If you put some dried bay leaves in a little muslin sack and rub it every once in a while, just place it near your flour and your cereals. It won't get rid of infestation, but it will prevent them from coming back. And these leaves can be cooked for hours in soups and stirs. They're very hard, very tough leaf. The legend, bay laurel is also called Daphne, and the god Apollo was boasting of his skills as a warrior to Cupid or Eros, and Cupid got upset with him and decided to punish him, and so he shot 2 arrows. The golden arrow he shot into Apollo, and that causing Apollo to fall in love with the first person that he saw. Cupid also shot another arrow of lead to Daphne, and the lead arrow meant that she would hate the first person that she saw. So this was a terrible trick to play. And Apollo of course, was instantly in love, but Daphne rejected him and kept running, trying to run away. And she begged her father, who was the river god, Peneus, to save her. And the only way he could do so was to change her into a tree. And Apollo still worshipped her, but at least you shall be my tree, and with your leaves my victors shall wreathe their brows. And so laurel is still a symbol of Apollo, and winners in the Greek Olympics and other sports were crowned with laurel leaves. Betony was carried as protection against the evil eye. And this is the plant itself, planted in churchyards to prevent activity by ghosts. And the Anglo-Saxon herbal recommends Betony to prevent frightful nocturnal goblins and terrible sights and dreams, otherwise known as nightmares. And to prevent dreaming at all, you're supposed to take the leaves and hang them around your neck, or drink some juice made from the leaves before going to bed. I'm not sure about that legend. It would seem to be the opposite, probably, effect, but I don't know. Butterfly milkweed we're familiar with today as the host for the monarch butterfly caterpillar, but Native Americans have used it for hundreds of years by harvesting the fibers from the dried stems, and they made those into rope and cloth. Chest inflammations were treated, and butterfly weed is also called pleurisy root because it was supposed to be good for these chest inflammations. And now, of course, this is what we grow for the monarchs.
Pardon the interruption, Miss Mary. Yeah. Would you possibly be able to pronounce the Latin names as you go along too, please?
I can try. I'm not very good at it, but I'll try. Let's go back. This is Asclepius tuberosa. I'll go back a few.
Why, thank you.
I think I did Basil. Ocimum basilicum. Laurus nobilis. And you can see how the nobility came there. Daphne. Stachys officinalis is Betony. There are many kinds of stachys. Another kind that we know today is lamb's ear, which was used as a, I don't have it in this talk, but lamb's ear leaves, those fuzzy little furry leaves, are astringent, and they were used during the Civil War to stop the bleeding after a soldier had been wounded. This is Asclepius tuberosa, and the L just means that's the Latin word. Chamomile nobile, again, nobility. And there are two kinds of chamomile. There's a German and a Roman. This is Roman. And this was dedicated to the sun god because the flowers are a daisy-like flower and reminded the Egyptians of the sun. Also associated with their sun god, Ra, was used as a cure for ague, which is a fever and a symptom of malaria. And it's believed that chamomile was yet another herb used in mummification process. Chamomile is one of the many herbs which have insect repellent qualities, natural insect repellent qualities. And I'll mention a few more, but lavender is another. The Romans dedicated chamomile to their gods. It has a sweet apple-like scent almost, and you can plant a chamomile lawn and walk on it. It was also used during the Middle Ages as a strewing herb. Since most homes had dirt floors, that would also be prone to insect infestations. And of course, the hygiene wasn't the best. So strewing herbs were used to both prevent insects from coming in and also to scent the air. Here's a close-up. You can see why this reminded them of the sun. It means apple of the ground, and it grows very low. It's only about 6 or 8 inches tall. Hippocrates, the doctor, was the first to mention chamomile, and he recommended it for purification and fighting colds. Now, the St. Louis Herb Society does not give any medicinal advice relating to herbs. There are lots and lots of information out there, but it's very hard to regulate when you say, oh, take blah, blah, blah if you have a cold. Well, how much? And is your plant stronger than the plant next door? So we don't give any medicinal advice. But in this case, in this talk and others, we do give some historical uses. So the Vikings, this was interesting to me. The Vikings added chamomile to their hair shampoo to make sure they stayed blonde. And of course, Peter Rabbit's favorite tea was chamomile tea. And another interesting thing is chamomile was supposed to have the magic ability to attract money. So the old time gamblers used to wash their hands in chamomile water to bring them great luck. People also thought that if you planted a sick plant next to chamomile, it would heal itself. I have no idea whether that's true. So already you've noticed that charms and witchcraft are quite prevalent beliefs and uses for herbs in historical times. Gathering herbs sometimes took place at night or at the sunrise, and you were supposed to be silent, do not use iron implements, and look toward the east while you plant. So it must have been interesting during planting time with the basil over here with the people yelling and cursing and the other people in silence. Many herbs were harvested at summer solstice because, of course, that's when they're at their peak and being the longest day of the year. Herbs were not only used to create potions and spells, others would be used to thwart potions and spells, or especially to protect you from evil. Chives are in the onion family, the allium family, and my best guess at this second word is shonoprasum. Chives could be used to tell your fortune, and if you put some chive leaves under your pillow, you were supposed to have a good night's sleep. Chinese have used chives for thousands of years to promote sweating, which was recommended for many, many diseases, and male fertility. Today, you can still use chives to help protect your garden from many insect pests, including Japanese beetles. Now, this doesn't mean that you won't have any Japanese beetles, but many insects find their food through scent. And if you plant a very strong scented herb, like I do, I plant under my roses, I plant chives. So it discourages the pests. Doesn't keep them away forever, but it certainly is more organic than using any spray. Since chives are in the onion family, this fellow, Martialis, says he who bears chives on his breath is safe from being kissed to death. No kidding, because of course, onions, chives. Marco Polo is credited with introducing chives to Europe, but they were not used for culinary purposes until well into the 1500s. So that was kind of interesting to me too. Purple coneflower, these are native to Missouri. Echinacea purpurea, there are many echinaceas out there, and I know you've heard medicinal stories about this and that and the other use for echinacea. But Lakota Sioux have used a decoction of the root to boost the immune system and relieve flu and cold symptoms. And many people still use various combinations of parts of the plant for these same purposes. It's also a beautiful flower, and if you let it go to seed, the goldfinches adore the seeds of this plant, and you'll have all kinds of goldfinches in your garden. Dill, this is some dill in my garden, Anethum graveolens, has been used at least since the 1st century and was used with babies to ease colic and induce sleep. The name comes from dilla in Norwegian or Norse, meaning to lull or a lullaby. It was believed to have magical properties that would hindereth witches of their will, which seems like a good idea. Dill seeds are often called meeting house seeds because along with fennel, which I'll mention later, they were often chewed during long church services to keep members awake or children quiet. Now this seems a contradiction in terms if it's supposed to put the baby to sleep but keep the adults awake. Not sure how well that all worked. But it was thought to be a sign of wealth and known for healing properties. It is an antiseptic and does inhibit bacterial growth. And dill fronds were once placed over the eyes to help induce sleep. So in this little dill seeds placed in a bag and worn upon the body or placed over windows or doorways will protect and bring blessings. Many herbs were hung in doorways or around the keyholes to prevent evil from coming in and good from getting out. Was thought to be used by witches who burned it to clear away clouds and thunderstorms. And conversely, also protect from witches if you hung a bunch of dill in the door. And of course, dill is still very popular today. It's not just for pickles, but still used in rye and pumpernickel breads and for scenting many soaps and cosmetics as well. It's easy to grow. It's an annual and it will self-seed itself, so you'll always have dill. It's a beautiful plant and wonderful in fish and chicken recipes. It also helps control the natural pest control by attracting green lacewings, which are one of the aphids, which are bad for plants, worst enemies. It's also said to deter tomato hornworms in the vegetable garden. So I often put a dill plant in near my tomatoes. And it was valuable enough in Talmudic records, valuable enough to be tithed. In other words, this could pay your 10% tax. Fennel, Feniculum vulgare, and vulgare just means sold in shops. It's just the common name. But the Greek name for fennel is marathon, which comes from the Greek place named Marathon, where the Greeks defeated the Persians. And the reason that it's called that is because the field was supposed to be covered in fennel. And so the Greeks believed that it promoted endurance and longevity. And I love this. Fennel seeds could also be placed inside the keyhole, just to keep those ghosts from entering your house at night. I don't know how well the key would work the next day if you forgot you'd put the seeds there, but that's okay. And the history dates back to Pliny, the Roman author of the Natural History. He believed that serpents, snakes, and dragons ate and rubbed against fennel because it improved their eyesight after shedding their skins. This picture is bronze leaf fennel. It's not, it's really an ornamental plant. The previous one was Florence fennel, and this is what you buy at the store and you use the bulb. Here are the seeds. This was the first King Edward in 1281 purchased 8.5 pounds of fennel seed, and that was just 1 month's supply. It was used as condiment and appetite suppressant. So at that time, the Catholic Church had many, many fasting days, and the faithful would use fennel to get through the day, a tradition that was brought to this country by the Puritans. This is another meeting house seed. People would bring the fennel seed to nibble on to stave off their hunger. And so this is a meeting house or meetin seed. And the seeds are very pretty for fennel. The legend for fennel is about Prometheus, and you know the legend of Prometheus bound. And the reason he was bound to a rock and his liver was eaten by an eagle every single day. He was the son of one of the original Titans. And of course, Prometheus is the god of fire. Prometheus and his brother, they were given the task of forming the first inhabitants on Earth, the first people. So Prometheus used clay and mud and fashioned the first male. He requested that Zeus, the fire god, give man the gift of fire, and Zeus refused. But Prometheus thought it was so important that he stole some fire from Mount Olympus and hid it in a hollow stalk of fennel, giving it to man. Well, as you can imagine, Zeus was not pleased. In fact, he was furious. He punished Prometheus by chaining him to a rock and having the eagle come every day and eat his liver, which would grow back every night to be repeated for eternity. And Zeus also punished man by sending Pandora down to earth to be the first woman. And as a wedding gift, he gave Pandora a beautiful box, but told her, don't open this. Well, Pandora's box released all the woe and evils of the world, but closed it just in time to retain the one last gift, the gift of hope. So this is the legend of Fennel. Horsemint, or one of the many monardas, fistulosa, has been used for skin infections and minor wounds by many tribes of Native Americans, including these I mentioned here. And it's a lovely plant. It also attracts butterflies and other pollinators. So this is horsemint, it's called, but there's bergamot. There's many kinds of monarda. Juniper, which is an actual evergreen tree, Juniperus communis, was known as the tree of sanctuary because supposedly the Holy Family found shelter from Herod in the thick branches of the juniper trees. This is the witches, they're just all around the place apparently, were said to be obsessed with trying to find the exact number of needles on the juniper tree. And every time they counted, they'd always lose count. So after a while, they'd give up and leave that particular location alone. And after time passed, it became known that a juniper tree planted near the door would protect you against witches. And juniper berries are also made to make gin. And many Plains Indians tribes hung juniper boughs on their teepees or burned them in campfires to keep their homes safe from storms. And again, the Northwest tribes used juniper to banish evil spirits. So juniper seems to have been a witch preventative in many cultures around the world. Now, lavender, I have a whole talk about lavender. So lavender angustifolia, this means lavandula, and angustifolia means narrow-leafed, also known as English lavender. But of course, it's been used for perfumes and cosmetics, embalming in Egypt. A faint whiff of lavender was detected when they opened King Tut's tomb. It's also antiseptic and healing, and it's been thought to ward off evil and jealousy. But in reality, it repelled the fleas that carried the plague and therefore protected tanners, leather tanners, since they used a lavender water in their treatment and their tanning process. The genus word lavandula comes from lavare, which means to wash. And lavender's burned on St. John's Day to help ward off evil spirits. But in France, the actual washerwomen were known as lavenders because rinsing clothes in lavender not only make them smell good, but it does protect your clothing against clothing moths and still does today. And a little bag of dried lavender in your closets or packed with your wool sweaters will keep moths away and certainly smells better than mothballs. Both Queen Elizabeth I and Queen Victoria loved lavender. And during Victoria's time, products made from lavender became very popular. And certain places in England can also grow a lot of lavender. So many products were made during her reign that this kind of lavender became known as English lavender. It's antifungal, and it's the world's #1 aromatherapy herb as well. Not only tanners, but glove makers perfuming their products with lavender often escaped cholera. Another great legend, Marseille vinegar, or Four Thieves vinegar, was said to protect people from catching the plague. And there are two versions of this. Lavender was a common ingredient, and you can see over here apple cider vinegar, lavender, garlic, sage, peppermint, rosemary, thyme, and black pepper. Lavender was a common ingredient, maybe just to mask the scent of the other ingredients that aren't so wonderful smelling, like garlic and vinegar. And one version says after 4 thieves were captured, they admitted that this concoction had allowed them to rob the houses of plague victims without getting sick. And when they were captured, they offered to trade their recipe in exchange for leniency. On the other story, the thieves were captured before the plague outbreak, and they invented the vinegar when they were sentenced to bury plague victims. So either way, the lavender was one of these ingredients that were steeped in folklore, but in fact have a basis in fact, because it is does have anti-insect qualities. The Greeks called lavender nardus, referring to narda in Syria, and many simply call this plant nard. It was so valuable that blossoms of nardus per pound equaled the same cost of 10 pounds of bread or 10 liters of cheap wine. Now, prior to the First World War, the lavender still would go around to small towns in Europe and distill their lavender. And this is a very, very rough idea. You heat the water to steam, you put your lavender in there, and the essential oil is captured by the steam, which goes up through this tube. And then there's condensation tubes in cool water, and the condensed steam ends up with lavender water and the oil floats on top. This is a simplified version. Peasants in France and all over Europe would bring their loads of harvested lavender to be distilled. Native Americans have used lavender also, which was introduced to this country in the late 17 and early 1800s. And there's another lavender that is used by Native Americans. It's not in the lavender family at all, but it has lavender colored flowers called desert lavender or lavender bush mint with similar qualities. However, you can see Candia emorii is not the same family or anything similar. It's just that it has light purple flowers. This plant is called lady's mantle, Alchemilla mollis. I can't say any of these. This plant, after a little rain or morning dew, the water forms beads on the top of the leaves. And this is actually a plant in my garden last year. So it's really true. People believe that this little dew was magic, and the philosopher's stone could transfer base metals into gold. So that was one of the beliefs about lady's mantle. A lovely little perennial plant. Mint. Hopefully you all grow some mint. Mint is used for sauces and wines and traveled to England with the Romans. Mint does repel mice, and of course has been used to flavor all kinds of products, not the least of which is ice cream and candy and gum. Pennyroyal, which is in the mint family, mentha, does repel fleas. However, it's toxic, so you don't want to rub it on your plant, on your pets. So the story of mint is about Hades, the god of the underworld, who had an affair with a nymph named Mentha. And she got to bragging to her other nymph friends that Hades loved her more than he did his own wife, Persephone. Well, Persephone was not happy, and she turned into a plant that would live on earth to be trampled on. Hades could not undo the spell, but he was able to make mentha into a sweet-smelling, long-lasting plant. And that is indeed what mint still is. You must keep mint in a container, or that's about all you'll have in your garden. Mint was the scent most commonly used on the arms by ancient Greeks. But in Egypt, mint and anise and cumin were accepted as payments for their annual taxes and used as perfume. Oregano, oh, I don't have the Latin name here. Oregano. Oregano is believed to bring good luck, good health, and joy, ward off evil spirits. And as opposed to some of the previous herbs who were supposed to prevent dreams, if you put oregano on your head, it was encouraging psychic dreams, supposedly. In Greek, the word in Greek means joy of the mountain. And oregano is a perennial herb, and there are many kinds and flavors today. Created and gifted from Aphrodite, oregano was intended to make man's life happier, and it's used in wedding ceremonies to provide joy and used in funeral to convey peace to the dead. Referred to as the Prince of Herbs by Hippocrates. Now, after the Second World War, between 1948 and 56, the sales of oregano plants here in the United States increased by 5,200% because the returning GIs wanted the pizza herb, oregano, for their pizza. Oregano is in the mint family, and therefore you have to kind of keep it in a contained space. You can blockade it with bricks, but it will spread. It has beautiful flowers. Parsley, Petroselinum neapolitanum. This is flatleaf parsley. Parsley was used for funeral wreaths and grave plantings, and it's always been used because it's high in chlorophyll, always been used to sweeten the breath. And that's why parsley, curly parsley, is still used as a garnish in many cases. Only a just and upright person would be successful in planting parsley, and did best if planted by a pregnant woman. I don't know why. But this parsley is very slow to germinate, and it was said that the seeds had to go to the devil and back 7 times before they'd start to grow. Parsley is a biennial plant. That means it has a 2-year life cycle. The first year it's all edible, and the second year it forms flowers and seeds, and it's kind of bitter. The women gave it to warriors before battle, and on top of coffins, it ensured a safe passage into the afterlife. The expression Deis tai selenon, to need only parsley, sort of meant you had 1 foot in the grave. The only thing left for you was parsley. I think you're all familiar with Rapunzel, let down your golden hair, but Petronella is the Italian version. Her mother ate some parsley, which belonged to the witch. And then that's why the daughter was locked up in the tower. Also, according to legend, the plant first sprouted in the blood of this hero, Archemorus. So parsley was sacred but evil. Warriors could feed parsley leaves to their horse to give them strength, but the Greeks never used it in their cooking. Romans did enjoy cooking with it. And early Greeks made crowns of parsley, similar to the crowns of laurel for the Nemean and Isthmian games, just like laurel was used in the Olympic Games. The botanical name Petroselinum is the Greek word for stone, as in its native areas, it grows on rocky hillsides. Young lovers were told not to cut parsley, as that would lead to a breakup in their romance. But as we know today, parsley is a host plant for the black swallowtail butterfly caterpillar. Rosemary has so many myths and legends. It was widely used to promote fidelity and known as the herb for remembrance. Ritual baths were used to bless and purify, and burning rosemary is said to help remember past lives. Again, if you kept a bundle of rosemary in your doorway, that would keep negative people and negative energy from entering your home. There are a couple legends about why rosemary has blue flowers. As the Holy Family was fleeing King Herod, they rested in a grove of rosemary. When Mary hung her blue cloak out to dry, the white flowers of the plant then turned blue. After that, the plant was then called the Rose of Mary in her honor. Now, another variation of the story is that it was Jesus' clothing that was hung out to dry. Either way, originally the story goes the flowers were white and then they turned blue, which they still are today. It's a fumigant and insect repellent, and it prevents food from spoiling for some period of time, and hunters would stuff their game with rosemary. Queen Elizabeth of Hungary had a creation for herself called Hungry Water, created in 1285, and it's still sold today as Queen of Hungry Water. Sacred to remembrance and therefore to friendship. It means dew of the sea and emerged along Aphrodite or Venus when she rose up from the sea. It's also believed that sailors returning home could smell rosemary as they neared land, and this would probably be true if the wind were right. And in Hamlet, Ophelia says, rosemary, that's for remembrance. Pray you, love, remember. And this is a rosemary shrub growing somewhere a little warmer than here. Our rosemary here it's a perennial plant, but this last winter killed most of our rosemary. Anne of Cleves wore a rosemary wreath. And at that time, wealthy couples would present a gilded branch of rosemary for every guest. Making a lotion with wine vinegar and rosemary was thought to sap the strength of a robber, so he could do no further harm. Sage, Salvia officinalis, comes from Latin salvare, which means to save. And Arab physicians believed sage would make you immortal. And even the Romans said, why would a man die while sage grows in his garden? Enhancing memory, students would place sage wreaths on their heads to make all this wisdom come through. Herbalists thought that sage would prosper or wane as the owner's business prospered or failed. And it was also said the plant would really only grow best where the wife ruled the house. Now, of course, the husbands didn't think so much of this, but there was also some punishment involved if the husbands tried to remove the sage. And sage is a cleansing herb. It's antiseptic and can be used in cleaning solutions. And of course, Native Americans have used sage for many hundreds of years as well, especially dried sage in smudging. White sage is Salvia apiana, is native to the high deserts in this country, and to get rid of unwanted energies and to ask for protection. So this is smudged sage. Smudging. Sweet marjoram is a cousin of oregano, Oregano marjorana, and this is Venus, or Aphrodite, gave the plant its scent to remind mortals of her beauty. It's used as a wedding herb in bridal bouquets still today, and a crown of marjoram was worn by both the bride and groom. Also during rites to the god Osiris in ancient Egypt. Protects you against evil and enclosed in magical amulets to ward off cold and repel witches. Wild marjoram had a reputation for protecting milk during storms. It was believed that a storm would cause your milk to curdle or sour. This is sweet marjoram growing. And this is the little bury me in St. Mary's Church, and for my love so true, make for me a garland of marjoram and of lemon, thyme, and rue. And if you want to dream of your future spouse, you put marjoram under your pillow. French tarragon is still used today, and it's important in béarnaise and tartar sauces. It thrives in France, where it's called estragon, and the folk name is herbe de dragon. It's believed to cure bites of snakes and mad dogs, and it was limited to royal gardens until well after the time of the Tudors. Artemisia draconculus refers to dragons or serpents, Draco in Latin, and the plant's root system resembles dragons or serpents. Romans thought tarragon would prevent tiring, and if you placed tarragon in your shoes before you started a long journey on foot, you wouldn't tire as easily. Thyme, this is one of my favorite little stories. People used to believe that fairies lived in banks of wild thyme, and it's Thymus vulgaris, thyme growing throughout the hills of Mediterranean countries. Representing courage, ladies would embroider sprigs of thyme onto the scarves they gave to their favorite knights. This is another favorite strewing herb. And today you can buy creeping thyme, which you can walk on for the same purpose, burned as incense. And here's the little fairy. Was to aid sleep and ward off nightmares, place on coffins to ensure safe passage. And it's one of the few herbs that retains, along with oregano, it retains its flavor when dried. And it's used in a bouquet garni, which is a bundle of fresh herbs tied together. And I love this little painting with the fairies too, and the thyme. So that is the end. I hope you enjoy growing and using your own herbs. Of course, herbs were grown in the Middle Ages in monasteries because that was where most of the medicine took place. I'm going to stop my share and I'm going to look at my chat.
We do have a couple of questions.
See that. Why is Syrian oregano my favorite? Well, to me, it has a little bit sweeter, milder flavor than Italian oregano or Greek oregano. All the oreganos dry wonderfully well too. And I think I pronounce, to the best of my ability, pronounce the Latin names. Which part of the plant do you use for dried lavender? Well, you can use any part. You use the stem and or the flowers. Both have the same scent, and both, when dried, retain their scent for years. And if you hang lavender in a dark place for it to dry for 5 or 6 weeks, it will also retain most of its color. It'll fade gradually over years, but it will hold its color for quite a long time. So if you have lavender, you could just pick it and stick it in a vase without any water. Can you say a couple of herbs that will grow in high shade? Very few. Most herbs need full sun and good drainage. There is one little plant that's a darling plant. It's called sweet woodruff. I'll type that in. And that will grow under medium shade, under not a dense shaded tree, but under a tree. It has a wonderful aroma and beautiful little white flowers in the spring, but most of these herbs need sun, sorry to say. Are there any other questions? This is, again, I have more talks that talk about culinary use. There's a lavender talk. I think later this year, Erica, we're going to do
We are.
pest prevention.
Yes.
We have with herbs. And then in July, I'm doing a harvesting and preserving your herbs. So those will be more programs to look forward to. And that goes more specifically into the growing and harvesting them. The garden behind me is my garden, taken day before yesterday. I'm going to go out of the way so you can see. So everything's coming up. And the inside row, there are a few perennials. I just put in my basils and things. These are mostly perennials. Chives are blooming. French tarragons over here. Oregano's down over here. Lovage. So I do grow a lot of herbs and use a lot of them. So are there any other questions? I think the timing is just about perfect. So I think I got them all.
I think so too.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, everyone, for coming today. Again,
one last thing I wanted to mention. This book. Oh, I'm going to have to stop this. Wait 1 second.
There.
Lore and Legend. This is the Lore and Legend Culinary Herbs and Spices, which I showed you, but this is the newest version. So
lovely. And if anyone is interested, the library does have the St. Louis Herb Society's collection of materials available to be checked out, as well as viewed in our rare books collection, which is actually really cool. Just make an appointment and come on down. Miss Mary Hammer, thank you so much for coming today. We will see you again in June, July,
yep,
and August.
Perfect. Bye,
Thank you,
everybody.
everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you. You too.